most notable thing about Darklings is they can use priests to dig. And they also get 2 points for that. So anytime they have a priest, they can use it to spade and score with that. And so that's really, really significant. And part of the reason it's so significant is priests are something that you can just crank out, right? You can produce that internally. And so you could, start producing all these priests, and those are digs and points every single round. And that's really powerful. Another thing I'll note here is their sanctuary is strangely expensive. And you might think, this is a bad building. It turns out it's actually really good. And in short, the reason is that any structure that's going to help you produce more priests with the ability to turn priests into digging and points is good. So all of these structures over here are extremely valuable to Darklings, and so they want to be building those. Even though the SA is expensive, it's quite good. The stronghold is not very important for Darklings. Never build it in the first couple rounds. Basically, beginners should never build it in the first 4 or 5 rounds. You can occasionally build it at the end of the game for points. It lets you once convert 3 workers into 3 priests. But a lot of times you should be trying to play Darklings without the stronghold. The last thing I'll note is they start with only 4 workers. And so that will change the way we think about openings. And they start with a priest in hand. They're the only faction that starts with a priest. And so you could think about using that for digging or putting to cult in round 1, which we'll talk about next. Darklings have a lot of different starting placements that they could do, and so it's going to be pretty situational. But in general, of course, they're looking for hexes where they'll have neighbors that will give them power, but that they can pretty easily dig to complete a town. They'd ideally not be increasing shipping too much with their priests because their priests are so valuable. So one example that's a nice one is if starting on E5 is a really nice starting placement if you can grab E6 and E4, because that can then be your sanctuary town. But if yellow is on F4 and they're going to go before you and dig E6 before you, or if mermaids are going to be on E4, all of a sudden that hex is not a great starting placement. So that's an example of one that's a totally reasonable starting placement if you can get those two. And if not, all of a sudden you probably don't want to start there. Another option would be C1. C1's nice for Darklings because you can dig 2 hexes, right? So this is a really natural town spot. And even if yellow beats you to this brown, it's only 1 dig more to do the green and do a town that way. So C1's really nice. And if swarmlings are, not on D2, then that can work well. The other nice thing about C1 is with 1 shipping, you can get to B2, B3. So, and in certain very rare situations, you could actually start E5 and C1. But usually the most common is to start on one of those 2 and then one of these 2 hexes in the east, either G5 or E10. And G5 might be a little bit more common. And the big issue then is you're starting west and east. How do you connect, right? And so let's say we're on G5 and we dig F5 and now we're to the water, and now you can start seeing different possible ways to be connecting, right? Like maybe we're also digging G4 and then building H4 and we head to the south, or maybe later in the game we go to 2 ship and we even double dig E8, and now all of a sudden that opens up a lot of possibilities on 2 shipping. Maybe we even do other weird, go to 3 ship. There's different ways for us to connect then from there. And because Darklings are good at digging, usually they can find ways to connect later if they want to. So that's part of the idea with a split start, one of those west placements and one of those east placements, and the E10 would involve, right, going to D8, and then maybe you're going to 2 ship and digging I11, B5, and then trying to get through there, right? That's a pretty common, Darklings attempted connection from a split start. We'll talk about other ways to think about that. So the other options that you could consider, I think there are times where H5 is a reasonable starting placement. There are times where either, A8 or B5 are a reasonable placement. So I think you could think about different combinations, and it will be really situational. And I think the key for you to figure out is, where's the power going to be? Do I have easy digging to set up towns? And then is there some way for me to potentially connect later, or is this a game where I'm not going to try to connect? We'll come back to that. Okay, so we should think about 3 possibilities for openings with Darklings as beginners. The first is, let's say, Temple, New Dwellings. The second would be Temple, no New Dwellings, but Priest to Cult. So that would be a second option. So, and then the third option is opening Sanctuary. Those are the 3 that I think you should consider. So first of all, Darklings only start with 4 workers, which means they can go Trading Post, Temple. They definitely want to be doing Temple. Priest production is so good for Darklings that you really want to get your priest production going. So you can open with your 4 workers, Trading Post, Temple. Well, now all your workers are spent, and you have this priest. So if you don't have an easy way to, get workers efficiently, or there's really nice cult rewards round 1, right? Like if you see water cult reward round 1, earth cult reward round 1, or something like fire worker reward round 1, those are all moments where you might say to yourself, interesting, maybe I'll go temple, priest to cult, and get out of the round. The reason I said fire workers is make your default favor for Darklings fire 1. They're really good at generating workers because they can dig so efficiently. They're going to get dwellings down easily. And they really want to be doing temples and sanctuaries, and those are just really coin intensive. And so it's incredibly helpful to have the coin production. So make fire 1 your default. Every once in a while, you can open Earth 1 potentially if you think you can get enough access to coins other ways. And situationally, Earth 2, Air 2, and Water 2 could all make sense situationally, but in general, coins are what they tend to be short on. Okay, so that's Temple, Priest to a Cult. That gives you something good back, like a priest, a dig, or workers back off of fire with fire 1. All of that could make sense. Perhaps a little more common, you might consider going Temple, New Dwellings. Okay, so you could do that by. So one example is if you're on the big building scroll. Now you all of a sudden you have 2 extra workers. And so you have a priest in your hand. So with that priest, you could dig down a dwelling. And if you take priest power action, now you could dig down a second dwelling because you had those 2 extra workers from the big building scroll. So this big building scroll is actually really nice for Darklings in round 1. And it actually makes you quite flexible, something I'll come back to in the sanctuary opening. Alternatively, if you start on dig scroll or a priest, you could also take the worker power action and open Trading Post Temple, 2 new dwellings that way. Because now you have 2, the priest in hand and 1 of those to dig with, and you just need 2 workers to dig down those 2 dwellings. So those are ways to open Temple, 2 new dwellings. One more example would be starting on temporary shipping. And there's a couple spots where with 1 dig, so for example, if you're C1 in the northwest, there's a temp ship spot where you, with 1 dig, you dig a brown and there's a black on the other side of it, for example. So if you start on temporary shipping and you take the worker power action, you can, with 1 dig, which you have your priest in your hand, you can get 2 new dwellings down that way. So those are all sort of nice ways to get all those scrolls sort of help you get do the temple 2 new dwelling route. The last thing the third opening that we're going to consider that's really nice is doing the sanctuary. So the sanctuary is just really powerful because now all of a sudden you're going to produce 2 priests every round, and unlike doing a second temple, you also haven't replaced one of the dwellings out on the board. So you still have that dwelling that's going to be producing workers. So that's why it's nice. You get to 2 priest production and you still haven't replaced the dwelling on the board to produce workers. And so the most straightforward way to do the sanctuary is start on the big building scroll and take the workers power action. And you need a few more coins as well. Darklings in general always love grabbing the coins action when they can. So, for any of these game plans, if you also have an opportunity to grab the coins action, that's probably wise. And when you open with the Sanctuary, now you can grab something like Earth 1 and then either Fire 1 or Earth 2, and off to the races you go, right? And so like a dream round 1 for Darklings would be start on big building scroll, take the worker power action, it's Sanctuary scoring round 1 with let's say it's Fire Workers reward. You take Fire 1 with one of your favors. You have this priest in your hand. You're going to put that to the Fire Cult, so that's going to give you workers back. And you're opening Sanctuary. Like, that's a monster opening for Darklings. Couple other nuances here on the openings I'll just mention. So worker power is actually kind of a nice scroll for Darklings, because if they want to open Temple 1 New Dwelling, that worker then is one that they can dig down with the priest that they have in their hand, right? And so they don't need to take the worker's power action then. So if you want to open Temple 1 New Dwelling and then get out of the round quickly, worker power can be nice. And then, Darklings always like coins, so when in doubt, you can always take 6 coins. I also wanted to flag the 4 coins in a cult step. This could be a nice scroll for you in a couple ways. So for one, if you take Fire 1 and it's, and you get a reward for, being on the second step of Fire, for example, that could be a worker for you. Perhaps a little more common would be one where you are you're gonna open Temple New Dwellings or something like that, and you can take Earth 2, which gets you to the 3rd step of Earth, because you start with a step, and then this could be the 4th step for you, right? So that that cult step could actually scroll could get you to the 4th step on Earth. So that's another idea. So again, the 3 ones are Temple, 1 or 2 priests to a cult. You could do Temple 1 or 2 New Dwellings, or try to open Sanctuary. Those are the ones that I think you should consider as beginners. So the standard way you should think about playing Darklings is not culty. So, maybe you put 1 priest to cult round 1, very rarely maybe 2, but usually you're not actually playing culty as Darklings. Usually you're trying to do either Sanctuary opening or the Temple New Dwellings opening. And I'd say 3 kind of directions you can go. The easiest one to do well is to do something like a split start, and actually not even try to connect them. So you give up on network. This is the easiest one. So in general with Darklings, what you want to do is build temples, build your sanctuary, build a temple. Like those buildings that produce priests are just so good for you. And then you can just explode later with points and digging and putting out dwellings. So in general, you want to take coins power actions. You want to land on coin scrolls. You want to get your sanctuary up, build temples, etc. But the 3 game plans would be, I'd say the easiest one to do well is aim for a game where you're not actually going to connect your 2 starting points, and you try for 3 towns, and you just try to score a ton by playing the track, by digging with your priests, and then maybe you're able to scrounge out like 3rd place on network, even though you didn't connect your two starting placements, and then maybe you get 8-10 points on the cult. So sort of just a little bit of like 3rd on network, a little bit of cult points, and you just scored a ton because Darklings are good and they can score a lot. So that game plan will involve taking like Earth 1, Water 1, hit Trading Post round hard, and do a 3rd town. So like one example is like, let's say we did 1 town in the west like that. We're going to do 1 town in the east, or maybe even just like a sanctuary town. And then the question is, where's your 3rd town? Well, one option would be, doing in the north, doing your 3rd town there. One option would be if you started on G5, you could try to do a town in the south. And again, that's just for points. You're like, trying to grind out that 3rd town, score with your favors, maybe take the 11-point town in the end. I'd say this is the easiest way to have a good Darklings game, is to not even really think too much about the cults or network. Maybe just a little like fight for 3rd on network potentially. Otherwise, just play the track, try to hit hit Earth 1 and Water 1 really hard, and you're going to score with your priest digging. So that's always a good plan. That can work well. Just a matter of finding where that third town location would be. So I'd say that's the easiest way. The second one is a little bit, I'd say what I just described is probably the safest one for beginners to do. Probably the second easiest to execute, that's usually not the best way to go, would be to go culty as Darklings. And that usually involves trying to do one town early to take the 2-key town that gives you 2 steps on each cult. Maybe let's say you put 2 priests to 3 spots in the first 2 rounds. You can definitely beat other people to one of the 3 spots. You're the only faction that starts with a priest. You're gonna go to an early 2-key town. You get tall pretty quickly because you're doing sanctuary early. So now all of a sudden you're zooming up the cults that way. You can also do a second town pretty quickly because you can dig, to a black. Now you're taking the 8-point town, which is 1 step on each cult. Maybe in the mid game or even round 1, you're taking a water 2 favor. And now you're gonna use that to move up the cults as well. Maybe you can scrounge out a third town somewhere with that game plan. But you'd only want to do that if there isn't strong cult competition, if there's no cultists, no swarmlings, for example. But I'd say that one's fairly straightforward. If there aren't swarmlings, cultists, or chaos magicians, you could definitely go for a culty Darklings option. And I'd say that's pretty low risk in those circumstances, as long as you hit those thresholds, those checkpoints that I was just referring to in terms of the 2-key town, the 8-point town, etc. The third sort of standard way to play Darklings that I think is the hardest but the most interesting is to play them for network. And that's either going to be, one of the issues with trying to play for network with Darklings is usually that means you have to increase shipping, and they're already a little tight on coins because they're sanctuary and they want to do temples so much, and those are very coin intensive, and shipping takes using priests, and priests are so good for you that you'd rather not put them towards shipping. However, because they're so good at digging, they are a faction that, if you think about it, really kind of should be competing on network. But it's just that you might need to do weird starting placements, right? So you could imagine needing to do, E5, and now all of a sudden you have to entertain B5 just to make sure that you can connect your west to north easily, as opposed to starting, G5 and then maybe risking connection. Or I think a fun one is if you start E10, you can try to do something even on one ship where you're digging yellow, B5, and then you're trying to connect through the north that way. So, but those are sort of like wild Darklings games. They're a lot of fun, and that usually means when you're towning, you're taking a ship town and trying to get your shipping up and expand out that way. And that can work well, and sometimes Darklings are really good at digging. So sometimes that even involves grabbing a yellow or a green that takes 2 digs, but once you have your ship up, you might have more ways to connect than you might realize. So I think that's really fun, but I think is slightly harder to pull off. But that would be the third sort of quote unquote standard way to play Darklings. Darklings are strong, not overpowered, but robustly strong. There isn't too much that drastically swings Darkling's fortunes. Every once in a while, brown being in the game can be awkward in terms of starting placements, and it can sort of help to be the one to place last after brown has to commit to a spot. But in general, Darklings, they have so many different starting spots, and the fact that they have the sort of vanilla, just score a ton with 3 towns, don't really bother with cults and network as an option, that's just really robust and consistent. If there are no cult factions in, you can, go, maybe you have upside as a cult, being the cult faction in that game. And if you can do 3 towns with that could be really powerful. Or if you see that you're going to be able to connect and there aren't any of the other big network factions. And one nice thing about being Darklings is you can't face alchemists who are really hard to beat on network because you're the black faction. And but like, engineers or stronghold nomads, stronghold witches can be hard for darklings to win network on if those aren't like if you have no color neighbor, like no mermaids either. Now all of a sudden it's looking likely that you have a lot of upside for going network as darklings. Couple other things to look out for on the setup, like they like to see the pre-scroll in the game. It's just good for them. All else equal, they'd like to see dig scroll not in the game. They'd like the game to be tight on digs for everyone else, and since darklings can produce their own digs with their priests, they can thrive in those situations. They'd love to see the big building scroll. It's awesome for them to get going, and they want to do their sanctuary early so they can score with that as well. They love seeing dwelling scoring because they're gonna pound out dwellings throughout the game and early in the game. The last one I'll flag here is temp ship. They do like temporary shipping because it can get them to that third town location, and they'd like to not have to spend priests, right? Because priests are so good for them since they can dig and get points with them. Last two things, if you see that they can easily get the sanctuary opening, like if they're gonna start on the big building scroll and get pretty easy access to the two workers and get enough power and whatnot to afford the coins for it, that's a clear sign that they have big upside in that setup. The one other thing I'll mention is they do really well in round 4 dig scoring games, because you could have 6 priests in your hand in a round 4 and then just score a ton of points with that. So they do well in dig games as well. The way to be spicy with darklings, and culty darklings, that doesn't count as spicy to me. Yeah, it's maybe not the super boring, don't connect 3 town one, but it's still fairly down the middle. Trying to do like some really long journey to connection is really fun as darklings, but again, one of the 3 standard ones. The real way to be spicy with darklings is to do a dwelling rush and not build a temple in round 1. Again, usually a bit risky, but because priests are so good for you. But the way to do that is you start on there's a couple different ways. So one would be starting on temp shipping, and if you're on C1, which is the northwest black, what you'll see is there's over the water 1 dig for 2 hexes, and then once you get there, there's another 1 dig for 2 hexes. They're both browns, and if you look at the base map or flip back to it in this guide, you'll see it. And so with temporary shipping, you have 1 priest in your hand, and you just need to take the priest power action, and with that you can do a dig, 2 new dwellings, another dig, 2 new dwellings, and you have 4 workers. So you're basically spending all your 4 workers to put down new dwellings, and that's that's a cool way to, for example, if it's a dwelling scoring round, dwelling rushes are just really, really efficient. From there you just try to get coins power actions, and you're going to try to temple up, start building TPs, etc. So that can work well. Another way to do it is not on temporary shipping, is to start on either a pre-scroll or a dig scroll so that you already have 2 digs in your hand. And in the east and west are spots where you'll see there you can do 2 digs for 3 hexes. So you have 4 workers, so you can do 2 digs and build 3 new dwellings, for example, let's say in the west. And then if you take the priest power action, you can even dig down another dwelling, let's say in the east. And so now you've done 3 digs, and you got 4 new dwellings down. One is like going to be ready to town really early, so that's a route to being able to town early in the game. Definitely round 3 town would be really straightforward to do from an opening like that. But that's a cool dwelling rush type of opening. And so at that point you just want to be taking coins actions and going from there. But want to be spicy with darklings, go for dwelling rushes. All right, have fun.